You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
What's up, music fans? Welcome back to Modern Musicology. I am here with my good buddy. Oh, by the way, my name is R. Alan Seiler, and I'm here with my good buddies, Rob Levy.
What's up?
And Stephanie Seymour.
Hi, everyone.
And we are joined once again for the second show in a row by our good friend, Matt Alschbach of the Rock and Metal Profs podcast. Matt, how are you?
Thanks so much, everyone. I barely made it to the show on time. My car's got about 100,000 miles on it, and I was at the dealership trying to buy a new Cadillac.
Hey, now, that was a setup.
I am so sorry.
Oh, no, that's so funny.
I'll see myself out.
Yeah. This is Matt's last appearance on our show. No.
Oh, my God. You're so funny. All right. So this week, in case you didn't pick up on that clever little clue, we're going to be talking about the brand new Billy Joel documentary. But before we get into that, I've got a little bit of listener feedback that I want to get to. This comes from our episodes covering the music of 1985. And this comes from Mandy Beth Glenn. And she says, I really enjoyed the 2 episodes about the music of 1985. It reminded me of some bands that I then pulled up on Apple Music to listen to while at work. I don't listen to your show every week, but when a subject matter really piques my interest, you get my attention. I remember 1985 as a particularly great year for music. Thank you. And Andrea, thank you so much for listening when you do. And, you know, we totally get that. I've got lots of podcasts that I listen to religiously every week, and then I have a lot that I don't, that I look to see what the topic is, and if it's something that interests me, I listen, and if it doesn't, I've got other podcasts to listen to. So no problem, we totally get it. We really appreciate you listening when you do. Now, we're going to be talking about Billy Joel. And Stephanie, this is your topic, so take it away.
Okay. Well, for anyone who doesn't know, part 1 of the 2-part documentary came out on HBO Max on July 18th, and part 2 was released on July 25th. It's called And So It Goes. It is a very in-depth look at his career, at Billy Joel's career and his personal life, starting pretty much at the very beginning and pretty much going through today. I don't think they don't discuss his diagnosis of his illness, of his the NPH illness that he has now, but I think it goes pretty much up to present time.
Yeah. So not only is he extensively interviewed, but so are his ex-wives and other family and band members. So there's a broad coverage of guests in it. And I think what this documentary did so well is paint a picture of really like a survivor in an industry that can eat you alive, and especially if you're someone not comfortable with the spotlight, like Billy Joel. He's really not. So, I mean, but just time and time again, he had a vision for what he wanted that wasn't really in line with what the record company always wanted or expected. He followed his own path and totally persevered. So I just want to say one thing before we start discussing this. I feel a bit vindicated by this documentary after I finished this. Like, one of the first things I said to Bob was, I've loved him all along, so screw everyone who made fun of me, Right. I mean, I know it's easy to bash, someone for liking his music because it's not the coolest, but I feel like at the end of this, you felt like this is like the toughest motherfucker out there. He was like he's so punk rock, his attitude, and then he can write like the perfect melody. So anyway, I want to know, I'm going to throw it to you first, Matt. What are your thoughts on the documentary overall? I mean, was it all you expected it to be? And, just in impressions. For me, I thought it was one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, and it went beyond my expectations. And I think that's because he was so forthcoming. and open, and so was everybody who was interviewed. But so Matt, what are your impressions?
The first thing that I would say is it was just remarkable to me how many photos, how much video there was of the early years.
Indeed.
There was so much great information, so many images. And I guess when you've got an authorized documentary and the artist is opening up the vault, you're going to get access to material and images you've just never seen before. But some of that early stuff in the clubs, when he was performing with the Hassles, the album cover for Attila, which just magic. I guess we'll get to that, but it was just I had no idea he had a metal phase. That was so exciting to me. He said that Led Zeppelin 1, quote, pulverized him. I was like, well, you know what? This guy had legitimate hard rock and metal cred. And I love that they kept referring to, we both loved heavy metal. I wouldn't necessarily say that Zeppelin was heavy metal, but at the time that was heavy rock.
Yeah.
And, it was a deep dive, in looking at his family history, his father escaping Germany, going to Switzerland, and just the way his father behaved and then the way he behaved. There was clearly some generational trauma. So it handled some nuances that I certainly was unaware of until watching this.
Oh yeah, I think it did a great job of showing, his beginnings, both family life and start of being a musician. It was really great doing that. Alan, what was your impression?
Well, what I loved about what you're just saying about showing his like origins is that it took his career chronologically, but not his origin story, which I thought was really interesting because they would almost do it in discrete chapters and they would sort of drop them throughout. So it wasn't like the first 2 hours was on, I grew up in New Jersey or wherever and took piano lessons. They did that and they did it very thoroughly, but they did it throughout the whole documentary. And okay, first of all, this was 5 fucking hours. Oh my God. And, I hadn't had time to watch it yet. And we were going to be recording this on a Sunday night. And then we had to bump it up 3 days. And I'm like, holy shit, I don't have time to watch this. I burned through all 5 hours at one time. And it was a lot of Billy Joel. And I just want to say that about hour 4, I was zoning out. And I tried to stay focused. And it was difficult, but that wasn't to say that I didn't like it because I really enjoyed this much more than I thought I would, even though I love music documentaries and I always get something out of them. And I like Billy Joel a lot in some ways and not a lot in other ways. And I felt like this really gave me a better understanding. And it being 5 hours, it didn't have to brush past anything too quickly. It was able to spend time on lots of different chapters and lots of different elements and be able to explore those things a little bit more.
Yeah.
I also want to say that I was really impressed by the number and the breadth of people that were represented in this documentary. People who, and you mentioned his ex-wives, and I want to talk a lot about that.
Yes,
but his a family friend from when he was growing up.
I know.
Members of his first band, the Hassles. You had Pink. You had Garth Brooks. You had the half brother that he didn't even know that he had until he was fully grown.
Alexander.
You had Nas, for fuck's sake. Who would ever think that you would get Nas in a documentary about Billy Joel? And
he was great.
He was fantastic.
Yeah. And
I just thought the breadth of people that they had talking about this really elevated the subject matter a lot.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, again, he had representatives from every area of his life and beyond.
Yeah. And you were talking at the beginning about how this covers from the very beginning all the way up to current. Yeah. And you mentioned his diagnosis. The other thing it doesn't cover is in 2024, he put out a new song. It was the first thing that he had released in over a decade and a half or something like that. And that was not mentioned at all.
I know, that was weird because he played that. He debuted it on, what was it? It was
the Grammys
the Grammys or the Music Award. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's odd.
I thought that was such a weird omission.
Yeah.
Anyway. That's it.
So I knew he was into classical music, and I knew that he was sort of classically trained, but I really loved that whole exploration of how it permeates through his music, where he goes from Beethoven to one of his songs on the piano. I love it when they do stuff like that. I really liked the sort of exposition stuff, the non-career stuff, like they're talking to Springsteen and some of the people that, Alan alluded to, and you're sort of figuring out where his context is as a musician. Because, everyone pretty much knows, oh, yeah, he had all these hits. He toured with Elton John, but, it kind of puts an exclamation point on his career by like, yeah, I sold out Madison Square Garden
150 times.
Yeah, exclamation point, mother, blah, 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 right? And that sort of puts him in a context that I think even people that are casual fans of him are like, stop, what? And for me, I guess the biggest takeaway is that sort of Billy Joel is kind of the everyman, right? He's a guy that like you can listen to if you're in an all-female rock band. If you're a punk guy, you can listen to him. There's somebody, no matter who they are, has a Billy Joel song they like and they can connect with. So he's got this interesting way of reaching audiences that don't normally listen to rock acts. And he's not really, I never thought of him as being so categorizable before, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think he's, yacht rock, and I don't think he's AOR rock, but he's kind of in this different little niche.
Yeah.
And I never, until they bring it up in the movie, I never thought of him as being sort of in the same class as like this. This is all part of the Great American Songbook, right? Like all these Billy Joel songs are that was the big takeaway for me.
What you said, I mean, because I think it was Pink that said, when Piano Man starts playing, like everyone just stops and sings along. That was it's so true. You can't not sing to that song, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows Honesty too. Everybody knows, scenes from an Italian restaurant. There's just like things that have penetrated into the mass consciousness.
Right.
Alan, you mentioned that you wanted to talk about his wives, and that's specifically one I want to talk about too, because first of all, I feel like it's a testament to him as a person that all of his ex-wives agreed to be interviewed. I was especially touched and moved by his first wife, Elizabeth, who was also his manager for years and years, when she said how special, their time was together and nobody could take their memories away, whatever. But, I never knew their relationship was the sort of the muse factor was so permeated his songs. So his wives were his muses, and he wrote these songs about them and for them,
Yeah. And what's super interesting to me about that is that first episode, which is 2.5 hours long, is just as much her story as it is his, because their lives and their careers were so intertwined. And I say their careers because her career became managing him, and she basically set up her own business. And I just thought she was such an impressive lady. I mean, she's so like statuesque, and she has this like shock of beautiful silver hair, and she's so confident and so intelligent and so well spoken. And I thought, I loved every second that she was on the screen. But then, you get, some of his later wives were much more public figures. Elizabeth was never that. She wasn't somebody that the public knows that well, not like a Christy Brinkley or anything like that. But what's interesting is that you look at Christy Brinkley, and that relationship ended 5 years ago or something. And you see how emotional she still gets about that time. And when you see, and Matt, you were talking about the amount of material that's available. The fact that she has all this like Super 8 camera footage of them on their trips, on their vacations, was amazing. I loved all that stuff. And I thought all of the wives were just added so much depth and so much context to all of this stuff. And they all added a lot of honesty as well. Mm-hmm. Christy talking about, I think it was Christy talking about that moment where she realized that he was more important to her than she was to him, or something. Like his career was more important than she was, or he wasn't as willing to trust her. And she sort of had a little moment of like, not quite a breakdown, but it's very much affected her. And I thought that was such a great moment.
To be honest, I feel like all of his relationships failed because of that. Ultimately, yes. It's so cliche, but it's so true. And that's why it's a cliche, right? Because it's the truth. He is an artist first.
Right.
Right. And maybe now at this point in his life, he can be more than that for someone, as much that someone else needs. But I don't think he could before.
Yeah.
He's also a walking contradiction. I mean, he really is a paradox. There were a lot of these things I didn't know. Like, I didn't know about the first wife. I didn't know about how they got together. I was so shocked that he basically poached her from his best friend, John Small. I was shocked by that. And it was so powerful when he was talking about how, he was so broken up about betraying John Small.
Yeah.
He says, and I got punched in the nose and I deserved it. And then he becomes suicidal. There's a couple of attempts to take his own life. I was just really shocked by that. He can really only communicate effectively through songs, through music.
Yeah.
His interpersonal relationships are a disaster.
Yeah.
I think that's the result of his parents. You can very clearly see that, right?
Oh yeah.
And he's a completely different musician in the eyes of people that want to know about him when you discover that, right? Because I always thought he was just kind of like this grumpy old reclusive artist. I didn't realize that it was taken out of, context. This sort of stony chiseled image of him kind of cracked a little bit when I saw him the first time I saw him. The first show that he wore the star was in Busch Stadium in St. Louis. Everybody was like, "Oh, wow, look at that!" And that kind of like made me kind of rethink about him. Like, okay, I know he's got an attitude and a swagger to him, which I never found off-putting. I just thought he kind of liked to be left alone. And now you sort of like, when you take the relationship with his father, his family's relationships with getting out of Europe, and his marriages, you totally get him in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And, the fact too that, from the opening, he says, this is the house on blah, blah, blah. I bought this house. It's like, okay, this is the guy who had a chip on his shoulder, and don't let him have that chip on his shoulder, because he will go until he fixes it, right? Like, he was pissed. I mean, he gets the house that everyone's, he doesn't think he'll ever get to afford. And then he decides, screw the label. I'm going to make the album I want, and it's going to be successful. And then I'm going to pivot in the 80s and reinvent myself. And, he's always doing things what he wants to do.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. He's totally making his own way.
Yeah, but he also does it in sort of a very aggressive sort of like, screw you, F you, middle finger. He's like got the perpetual middle finger up to the establishment, whether that is realtors, marriages or whatever, right? He's always got,
that's something that's so true. That's like Elizabeth was his making things okay but also obviously in a forceful way. She got things done for him that nobody could, before her. So again, so impressive, I think. But yeah, she was like smoothing over probably all his rough edges. And I think they probably made they did make such a great team.
Yeah. I liked hearing all of his band members talk about working with her. Mm-hmm. And what a sharp and smart and forceful woman she was. That she would walk into meetings with a record label and say, this is what we're going to do. Or if you want to do this, then I get to do this second. Like she was always very upfront with them and never back down. And I thought that was really cool.
At the absolute height of like misogyny of the 70s record industry.
Yeah.
Just what a ballsy thing, it's just like so awesome. She's kick ass.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, having somebody in his corner too is great. Right. And once he realized, one of the things that's sort of interesting about the documentary is like, once he realizes that he can have someone just handle all the business and he can make the music, you can tell he's much more freed Because once he finds out that his agent has been stealing from him and he's broke, that is his betrayal, I think, where he feels personally betrayed. The whole thing is interesting because he's betrayed his best friend, then he's betrayed by his record people, then he's got these issues with his marriages. It's just like back and forth of trust, back and forth, right? But it's very much something where you can see, outside of being utterly fascinating of how the record industry worked in the 70s, which nerds like me really like to know, it's really fascinating just to see what that does to an artist in terms of his creativity and his drive. Like, I don't think his marriage with Christy would have went the way it was had he not had to go out on the road to make all that money back. And that decision to not try to get it back or whatever was kind of interesting. And that was, I think, kind of an odd little part of the movie too. But that whole process of like him and his money and his royalties and getting it back was very, very, very fascinating.
Again, a cliche of the record industry, but
absolutely
true for a reason. And, imagine your ex-brother-in-law stealing like that from you, right? Because that's who it was, Susan's brother, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
And there was the guy that owned the label too, that in California, that he ended up having to buy out, and he got like a quarter of every copy of the record sold.
Artie Rip.
Yes.
Artie Rip off.
That's exactly what I thought, Alan. How apropos.
What a totally West Coast name, Artie Rip.
Totally.
It's either a noir detective or an LA record guy, right? I just found it to be, I was much more interested in this documentary as a character study than I was a musical exercise. And I don't know if that was that way for you guys or not, but that's kind of how it was for me.
He's such a fascinating dichotomy. So, Rob, to kind of work off of your point, he can be cutthroat. He can be a hard ass. He can be really vindictive. He writes The Entertainer as a critique of the music industry. But, there's also this kind of hopeless romantic side. I mean, think about all the beautiful, mushy songs that he writes about the women that he loves.
Oh, yeah.
When he's betrayed by his former brother-in-law, he's devastated. You referred to this earlier, Alan, when Christy Brinkley points this out to him, he takes his former brother-in-law's side rather than his wife. He's like, it can't be. He just can't believe that this guy would betray him. And I'm looking at this going, the moment that I divorced myself from Elizabeth, I probably would have fired the brother-in-law as let's have a clean break here. But he kept him on. So there's a level of trust there, this kind of family dynamic that is really dear to him until he gets badly burned and has to make all that money back.
Yeah. I feel like, he's a guy that just wanted to be left alone and make music, get it out there, and then other people do it. And then when he's forced to confront I have to do more in my life outside of making the music. Like, I have to have a say in the artwork and, the royalties and all that. And then I think he sort of falls apart, maybe emotionally, whatever, because I think when he makes the music, he can hide. And I think when he comes out of all of that, he sort of has to come out of his shell and deal with the real world. And I'm not sure with his upbringing that he had and it being sort of very esoteric that he was capable of that, right? It's utterly fascinating.
The stranger.
Yeah.
That's what I was alluding to, Rob, and when I was sort of like saying in the beginning. I mean, I feel like he didn't want to conform to what the record company wanted him to do at all in that business sense of a way, right? Because that's just not what he was about. He even said it in the movie. I never expected to have the fame or whatever. I just wanted to make a living wage. I just wanted to make this, be able to make music and have it be, supporting me as a person.
It's also really refreshing to know that, like, the guy's taking a vacation. He's in a tropical paradise and he just wants to go to the bar and play the piano, right? That's like such an incredibly, like,
it's humble.
Well, I mean, if you're a fan of the guy, it's very fulfilling for you. But if you've never discovered him or never really been like a deep dive in their music, that's like, that's pretty cool. And the whole sidebar about Whitney Houston was really interesting as well.
Yeah, that's fun.
That was pretty fun. But I found like the little nuggets like that. We got all these like little nuggets, oh, by the way, that singer was Whitney Houston. Next subject, right? You're like, whoa, wait. It's really hard the first episode to keep track of everything going on because it's like literally just one friggin' thing after another, right? And then the second one settles down into much more of like a melodrama. There's almost two separate documentaries.
I thought the second episode was so interesting. It wasn't at the very beginning of the show, but it was right up top, and that was a lengthy exploration of his family history and the root of his Jewishness, his family being in Nazi Germany and the way that they were, the experiences they had and the way that they were treated and how he identifies with that. I just thought that was so interesting.
I did too, because I knew not a lot, but I knew about it, but I didn't, obviously this is it's so in depth and so, I bet can you imagine how much footage they must have had to edit it down to 5 hours? Just the amount of information is probably overwhelming. How do you even edit that all down? Matt, were you going to comment on Attila?
How can I not comment on that album cover? So you've got John Small and Billy Joel in the gladiator gear that was used in Ben-Hur. It's too big for them, especially on Billy Joel. He's a little man, and so it's oversized. They're in a meat locker. They look absolutely ridiculous, and it reminded me of that line in the first Star Wars movie when Princess Leia sees Luke Skywalker, and she says, "Aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper?"
Right.
He just looks ridiculous, and you can see it in his face. Like, what are we doing? So I just absolutely love that.
Like some of those outtake pictures are just like, what are we doing?
Amazing.
It is pretty amazing. I really didn't know that album cover and was kind of shocked when I saw that he had a metal face.
I want that album. I'm actively looking for that album now.
I meant to look and see if it's on Spotify, but I never did. I forgot to do that. But I would love to hear that sometime.
I just did want to get everybody's hot take on maybe favorite songs or era. Hot take. I think, if it would, I have to say that I probably am going to pick the era that most people would, which is that mid to late 70s to the early 80s era of like, that's that triple punch of like The Stranger, 52nd Street, and Glass Houses. That's ultimate to me. And that also reminds me so much of Day Camp. That's when I actually discovered Billy Joel. I was 11. And not day camp, sorry, my sleepaway camp. It was, I was 11, and that was basically the soundtrack to the summer, The Stranger. It had come out the year before, but it was on a roll, of course. And so Scenes from an Italian Restaurant was huge at camp, as well as many other songs. But on that album, I just want to say that my favorite song is Everybody Has a Dream. That might actually be my favorite Billy Joel song. It's the last song on the album. It's inspired by Elizabeth, and there's an amazing gospel chorus on it. And I love that song so much. So I would recommend people go listen to that.
Yeah, I'm sure you all had the same experience. We're all roughly the same age, I believe. Mm-hmm. In the late 1970s, you could not walk into a home without seeing a copy of The Stranger.
Yeah.
And probably a copy of Frampton Comes Alive right next to it.
Right.
Those two albums. And so just by virtue of that, I ended up hearing The Stranger an awful lot. And Rob, you'll enjoy this. It was so incredible to me for the debut of the album when they're in the room with the record execs. They play the album all the way through and it's dead silent in the room. And someone says, I don't hear any hits on here. I don't hear a single on here. Incredible. It's nothing but hits.
Nothing but hits. Even the non singles are singles. Do you know what I mean?
It's his best album. I mean, yes. it's that, Moving Out, Anthony's song, followed by Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. Unbelievable. And Scenes from an Italian Restaurant is my favorite Billy Joel song.
Okay, cool.
Wow.
Love it.
Cool.
Love it. And I liked that he talked a little bit about it. He said that it's a song about people who peaked too early. and we all, if you've ever been to your high school, your 10th or 20th high school reunion, you've seen those people. right? And there's probably a mild bit of satisfaction when you see that, the football champ or the big man on campus didn't quite turn out the way he had hoped. So it's really a song about regrets and people's lives that didn't quite turn out the way they had envisioned them.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
I thought finding out the sort of the story behind some of the songs was super interesting to me, because I'm much more of a casual Billy Joel fan. I don't have a single Billy Joel album. I know a lot of his stuff, but it's mostly from radio exposure and from friends who were fans. And I saw him in concert one time back in I don't even know when the hell it was. And I literally have no memory of the concert except for they opened with the Prelude and Angry Young Man. That's all I can remember about it. And I remember that I really loved the show. But
yeah, that's cool. Rob.
Yeah.
So I remember growing up in St. Louis in the county, this sort of like working class, middle class family. And my sister, I don't remember every record she has, but like Matt says, I remember Frampton Comes Alive. But I also remember, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes and a couple other things. But I also remember 52nd Street.
Mm-hmm.
And then later after that, Glass Houses.
Yeah.
And I remember that both of my sisters really liked Billy Joel. And I'm like, I don't know much about this guy, just I know the name, right? And I kind of peripherally, like Alan mentioned, knew some of the songs and the hits and stuff, right? But, being a person of my generation, growing up as a weird new wave kid and stuff, I watched a crap ton of MTV. And that's sort of where a lot of my expansive into other things happened. And so really when An Innocent Man came out, when he was literally everywhere, literally he's like an artist that's kind of got a certain niche, right? But then when he does Uptown Girl and Tell Her About It and all this stuff, like it's got this retro doo-wop, old soul thing going on. And I loved that stuff at that point in my life anyway. I was really into the Four Tops and the Temptations and stuff. So like being into Motown at that time and then hearing Billy Joel kind of do that. So, and then you had the videos to go with it too, right? So it was very easy to sort of fall prey to that. And, I distinctively remember going to Camelot Music at the mall and buying, I think I bought
Camelot.
Camelot Music. I bought an Ultravox cassette and the Billy Joel's Greatest Hits, 2 cassettes thing together. And that's just because I wanted to sort of hear everything else. And I remember hearing like Goodnight Saigon, and I'm just going, wow, I've never really heard anyone with a clarity about what Vietnam was that I could understand as a teenager, other than because you have all this you have to understand in the early 80s and stuff, there's a lot of noise still about Vietnam from both sides, from veterans, and so that song just sort of cut right through that, right? I knew Piano Man was like this song that everybody liked, and I knew She's Only a Woman from Me, and honestly I knew Listen to Yourself, It's My Life song from Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks, right? Yeah.
Is that really? Is that true?
Yeah, it was a theme. Yeah. And that stuff. And then when I got that Greatest Hits cassette, I sort of began to deep dive. And I've never really been a massive fan of his. And I remember just like at one point when We Didn't Start the Fire coming out, first I thought like, okay, as a history major, this is great. He's mentioning all this cool stuff and fitting it in. But after a while, I'm like, enough.
That song is on Stormfront, so yeah,
and that's one of my so for Stephanie, I totally agree with you. My favorite period would be that mid to late 70s, because that's when I was really getting into radio and I was really starting to pay attention to music, and those songs, Only the Good Die Young, Stranger, My Life, Big Shot, You May Be Right, the more rock songs, not the ballads, but even like Just the Way You Are. It's such a gorgeous song, and I really have a new appreciation for it, having heard them talk about it, and especially with them talking to Liberty DeVito and him coming up with the drum part for that. I never really thought about it before, but it is such a weird drum part.
It is.
And it totally, because they played some of the like early versions of that song, and that drum part completely transforms what that song sounds like. But so I love all that stuff. I love that middle period where I was hearing him on the radio all the time, and it's not just a nostalgia thing, because I still hear those songs on the radio now, and I still love them. They still sound great. They still sound like they're just fantastic songs. But then I was going to say from the later era, there's stuff that I really love, and again, it's more. For the most part, it's more toward the more rock kind of thing. I love Allentown. Matter of Trust is one of my favorite later tunes, and it's him on guitar instead of on piano, and it's a whole different sound for him. Go to Extremes, I love, and then the Stormfront album, I really, really love. I can't stand that fucking Fire song. I hate it. I have never liked it. But Downeaster Alexa is phenomenal. The title song, Stormfront, is phenomenal. So I really dig a whole lot, and have for most of my life, his more serious stuff. When he's doing the like pastiche of other genres, of other styles, I don't like it. Mm-hmm. And even later on, River of Dreams, where he's kind of gospel-y, I just don't like it.
I love that song, man.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, even though my favorite period is what I said, it's like the benefit of hindsight, or just growing as a person and growing as a musician and learning about people's back catalog. I wasn't so into his 80s stuff in the 80s, but when I go back to it, oh my gosh. I mean, River of Dreams for me, that's just my highlight, but which is funny because not so much for you, but I really do like a lot of those 80s tunes. One thing I wanted to say quickly about Liberty's drumming in the song you mentioned, but also if you didn't ever hear Get It Right the First Time, or maybe you have, that drum part is sick. And also, you mentioned A Matter of Trust, and that's like the opposite, right? It's so 2/4, but it's so solid. It's just kick ass, that drum track.
Well, Liberty is most known for Billy Joel, but he's played with a lot of other people. And I just love that.
He plays with Ricky, him and Ricky Bird, who is a past guest of ours.
Oh yeah,
Ricky, Christine Ullman, and Liberty. There, some other person were in a really cool band together. But yeah, he plays with a lot of people. And by the way, Bob thinks there wasn't enough Liberty in this documentary.
Well, I'm thrilled with how much we did get.
Yeah. The other thing too that I thought was interesting is, and they didn't really touch upon it in the movie, but Billy Joel was literally everywhere in the 80s. I know we talked about, the albums he made, but, he's really branching out. He's, he contributed to a Cyndi Lauper album, a Julian Lennon album. He's on a Twisted Sister album. He's becoming this like musician that like everyone wants to work with in the 80s, and it shapes who he is going into the 90s. And I think that's really important.
The thing that I guess I noticed at the time, but I've never thought about before, is how when he was dating Christy Brinkley, how he became a celebrity, which he wasn't before.
Right.
I never really thought about that, but it totally changed his profile, and that's an interesting dynamic that late in someone's career. He's had over a decade of major hits, of huge hits, and then he becomes a big tabloid celebrity. That's just weird. That must have been a weird thing to live through.
Yes.
Yeah. And when she said, I loved it when Christy Brinkley talks about this. She's like, it's Billy Joel, she's like, tries to explain, like, I just thought it's just, I mean, the whole thing with them was really weird, like you just said. But like when she talked about it, it's like, I didn't think this guy was necessarily going to be good looking, but there's something about him, Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really cool,
The thing that I was impressed about, which I never knew before, this is eye-opening for me, but what's his name? John Small from the Hassles, who he started his career with, was in a band with, stole his wife from, all that stuff, comes back in the 80s and is the director for the videos for all those big, those big Christy Brinkley singles that they did. I was surprised. because there's really two separate documentaries, and there's not a lot of crossover as far as like characters that continue from one to the other. But he makes a big return in the second half, being a video director. That was eye-opening for me.
I also think John Small had the most powerful line of the entire film, the entire documentary. He said that at a certain point, after I think Billy's third marriage, he came to John Small and he said, he was in tears, and he said, "I've got $500 million and no one to share it with." And that was powerful.
Wow.
Yeah. So sad.
Wow.
Like, it's so true, though.
Howdy! A new year means it's time for a new season of the Dragon Con Report.
We're here to help you plan, learn more about the con, and make the most of your trip.
From guest announcements to tips for navigating the con, we've got you covered.
Catch the latest episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
Because Dragon Con is better when you're ready for it.
The Dragon Con Report, your ultimate guide to the con of all cons.
Subscribe now and start your adventure.
Let me ask you this more philosophical question. Why do you think it is that Billy Joel's music kind of transcends genre? And like, for example, I remember hanging out with a lot of my friends that were like metalheads, rockers, and they had Billy Joel albums. How do you explain that? I mean, he is a rock guy. I mean, I think you can qualify him as a rock star.
Yeah.
But the accessibility, what is it that transcends genre and musical tastes?
I feel like because he has roots in so many different kinds of music, classical, R&B, he pulls from here and there, and somehow he has the magic. I mean, there's almost something you can't explain when somebody has that quality, because there's so few of them, I feel like, that can reach masses like that with their original songs. But I mean, like Elton John is kind of a person like that. Well, yeah, they're very similar but dissimilar in different in a way, But it's like you would think it would be a very generic thing that someone would do to reach everybody, like a common denominator thing. But I don't think he's like that at all. I think he's like, every song is so well done and intricately crafted, and he has the gift of like a perfect melody. I think he's, that's really hard to do over and over and over again, but he does it.
I agree with that. Matt, you described, you asked what makes him, how did you say it? What about him being cross-genre? He himself.
He transcends genre.
Yeah. That's him. That's him as a person. And I think that a good song is a good song, regardless. Yeah. And the thing that this documentary really did well was drive home the fact that of his classical roots, that he himself is a composer. He's not necessarily a songwriter, although he's a songwriter. He really kind of approaches it, especially from the earlier stuff and up through the into the 70s, as a composer. And I think that's such an important thing, because he has this impeccable sense of melody, and the harmonic structure that he builds in his music, I think, is just incredible. And I think that there's something there. He has this elevated sense of melody, his song structure, his chord progressions. It's intelligent music.
Yeah.
But maybe tell her about it isn't that intelligent, but I think a lot of his earlier stuff really, really is. And I think that what am I trying to say? It
transcends.
Transcends. That's the word.
Transcends.
I think too, there's a distinction we don't make enough in American pop music, that we always say someone has to be a singer-songwriter, right? Oh, this person's a fantastic singer-songwriter, right? But we never look at this person's a good storyteller. And I think, alluding back to like Goodnight Saigon and looking at Piano Man and some of these other, he's telling stories, like
the story of every man in a way, right?
Yeah. So he's writing about, and it's fascinating because he's from Long Island, and he's very New York, but he's from Long Island, right? He's writing about like everyday things that everyone goes through, right? They're very sort of blue collar, they're very working man at the same time, and they're very much like ordinary people songs, right? Mm-hmm.
Relatable.
But the way that he does it isn't by doing clever rhymes or like melody hooks. He's telling stories. And the stories that he tells, Piano Man works because he's telling you the story and the music wraps around the story he's telling.
Yeah, he tells a story in a sense that you can see every detail that he's talking about. You can see the setting. You can see the people that he's telling you about. And, I think that even though I've always really loved his lyrics, this documentary made me appreciate him as a lyricist more than ever. Mm-hmm. He is an intricate lyricist and an intelligent lyricist. And the stories that he crafts in his songs just blow my mind. They're so good.
Yeah,
they're literature,
I know. Like, just think about the scenes from an Italian restaurant. That just paints the best. But like, you can see them driving in like the car. It's just it's every song is like that too. I mean, he really does captures something special in every song.
Yeah, it's nice to work with professionals. You guys perfectly crystallize that. Songwriting, tasteful compositions, melody. And you're right, Alan. A good song is a good song in any genre, in any style. If people like it and it's tasteful, sometimes, even if the masses love it, that doesn't mean it's bad.
Right, that's what I said. I feel vindicated because, damn it, he's just really great.
Because I know many rock people that had these rock sensibilities, and like the only album they might have in their collection, myself included, was a Billy Joel album.
Right.
And it was such an outlier at the time, but no one ever judged me about it because everyone else secretly loved Billy Joel. It's so fascinating.
Everybody had The Stranger and they would pull it out between like Ozzy and...
I really thoroughly enjoyed the exploration of his early musical beginnings, like learning to play classical music, learning Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, and he talks about Liszt and some other composers, and that I thought it was interesting. His growing up years that weren't really covered that much in the first half. It was the second half where you really get into when they're talking. Well, actually, I guess it was later in the first episode when they're talking about his third album. And that's like a full hour into the documentary, and that's when they start getting into some of his early musical influences. And he told that story about his father, like, punched him in the head and knocked him unconscious because he turned Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata into a rock and roll piece. Like he's playing the thing, but he's playing it in a different way. And I think that sums up Billy Joel perfectly. That he has these musical, this classical beginning, but these rock and roll aspirations.
Yeah, that's a great point. He heard the original and he made it into something new.
But I'll tell you what, as much as I enjoyed learning about his musical upbringing, about his classical roots, about his understanding of music and musical structure and that kind of stuff, because he knows Bach and Mozart and those kind of things. The thing that has always struck me about him that they really didn't touch on is his voice. He has the most extraordinary singing voice. I mean, he's got this powerful vibrato, but it's not one that gets out of control. It's not one that, he has absolute control over his voice, and it can do anything he wants it to do. And I'm always fascinated by how people discover their voice, how they develop their voice, how they develop their singing style. And I would kind of wish they had talked a little bit about that, but they never did. And I enjoyed the musical study, but I wanted the vocal study also.
That's interesting. That's a good point. He does have a very unique voice, and he has a great range too. And I think that I was like paying attention to in the watching the documentary is that as he grew older, he didn't really ever lose that. How people's voice changes. Obviously, his voice is lower, and that's natural. But he still has a really good voice.
Yeah,
he's like 76 now. He was like kicking butt
a few years ago, not even just like last year at the Garden. I mean,
there are other singers in that age range that just don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name names, but
okay. Yeah, I know who you mean. I know who you're thinking
of. I have a few people in mind.
But I know immediately who you're thinking of, and maybe Billy Joel toured with him. Is that who you're thinking of?
No.
Oh.
But that's okay. Another thing that I mentioned Just the Way You Are a little bit ago, and how much I love that song. The story, this is something I never knew. The story about how he didn't like the song and didn't want it to go on the album. And who was it? And everybody said, this is a great album. This is a great song. You need to put it on there. It's going to be a hit. And he didn't believe anybody until I guess it was the producer. I think it was. So let me pull somebody in and let them hear it and let them tell you what they think of it. And the two people that he brings in, Linda Ronstadt and Phoebe Snow, hear the song and they're like, holy shit, that's a great song. You have got to put that out. And it was Linda and Phoebe that convinced him, yes, I need to use that song. Thank you, Linda and Phoebe.
And it was a massive hit.
A massive hit.
Yeah, imagine that. Like, two amazing pop superstars telling you, no, that needs to be on your album. And it worked out.
Yeah.
Stephanie, I've got a question for you.
Quest.
Do you think that Billy Joel would be successful in today's music business with his bloodshot ball eyes and his Ned Flanders helmet hair?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, if he could do MTV videos back then and still, become the huge superstar that he was, I guess yes. I think the answer is yes. And I think that his songs are such that they will transcend any time period. And in a way, what Alan was saying, his songs hold true today. I think they do.
So talent would win out.
I think so. I mean,
even in the superficial music business of the 2020s.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, I have my doubts about that. I don't know. I don't think that. I mean, because there are still artists, around who were big. They're basically legacy acts, and they put out new stuff. And no matter how good it is, you cannot get it on the radio.
Okay.
And I don't know. You're only playing to your existing audience.
Yeah, I guess it's a whole different ballgame in a way.
And when he came of age, it was still very much it was not a visual medium, right? It was still about selling records, and he was able to make that jump into music videos and did really well. But I do wonder today, it's so much about looks, perhaps more so for women than men. Like you're right, Stephanie, he might still have a chance of making it and breaking big. It's tougher for women because it is so hyper focused on appearance.
Looks, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it is for men also. I mean, with One Direction and the Jonas Brothers and all those kids who are like super hot. And I mean, I don't care what gender you are, good looks is like money in the bank. Mm-hmm. If you're good looking, you can do anything you want.
You're embarrassing me, Alan. Stop.
But Matt, it to be true.
Matt's going to be the cover art for this episode.
There you go.
Not Billy Joel, Matt.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Last week, Matt, you talked about setting a record on our show for being a 3-time host. I think you've also set a record not only by being a 4-time host, but being, I think, the only person who's hosted 2 times in a row, like 2 shows back to back. So
I am honored.
Well, shall we wrap it? Because it's been about an hour.
It's been about an hour.
Does anybody have anything else that they wanted to say? Have we
were good.
Sold ourselves out?
Yeah, it was good. I tell you, that was a lot of Billy Joel to swallow in one sitting. But
yeah, it's hard I mean, just like the documentary, it's so hard to cover everything. I mean, there's a million things we left out, but it's just we can't cover everything.
Right. I really enjoyed it, though. I do recommend it. I think people should, if they haven't already, go watch it.
I will say, just honorable mention, Captain Jack and New York State of Mind. Brilliant.
Totally.
Brilliant.
Okay.
And I'll say honorable mention, Rosalinda's Eyes, All for Lena, Through the Long Night.
Brilliant.
Wow. I really do feel inspired to go and get an actual Billy Joel album now and start listening to some of the deeper.
Go get The Stranger and you'll be happy, and then you'll want to.
Well, I mean, The Stranger, that's like every song I already know anyway, so.
Oh, okay. You might not know. You might not know Everybody Has a Dream or get it right the first time, and you'll want to know them.
I know. You're right. But yeah, I'm definitely inspired to go and dig through the catalog now.
Very good. That was our goal.
Oh, good.
Convince you, Alan.
Well, I guess that's it for our exploration of the Billy Joel documentary. Like we said, if you haven't gone and watched it, set aside some time because it's lengthy, but it is rewarding. So definitely go give this a watch because it's fantastic. And I want to say, Matt, thank you so much once again for joining us. We love you. We love having you on. You are such a great, we just got to find more opportunities to have you on. So look for that. Look for an invitation.
It was a tremendous honor, and I do want to mention that I have redeployed episodes of the Rock and Metal Profs podcast.
That was my next question.
I'm uploading all of this now, and I really do want to have all of you on at some point, at some time. Maybe Alan will have you on to discuss great drummers and great drum tracks.
Oh, dude!
But at some point, I want to get all of you on, Anthony as well. So we're going to make that happen.
Okay. And
awesome.
And I have an Eric Carr story that I want to tell on your show.
Oh yeah, we want to hear it.
All right, Steph.
Yes.
I know people after this episode want to hear more about you. So where would they go to find that?
Okay, you can find me on Facebook at Stephanie Seymour Music. You can find me on Instagram at there_r_birds. And I also have a website, therearebirds.com. You can find me on Bandcamp under my name, and you can find me on Spotify and all the streaming platforms.
Groovy tunes. All right, Rob, hit it.
So I want you to tell your best friends, your brothers, your parents, your sisters or wives. If you have a sister or a wife or a girlfriend, tell her about it. Maybe you have an uptown girl. You can tell her about it too.
Wow.
We opened like this with Matt, and we're closing like this with Rob.
Exactly.
So you can let them all know that you can find me on Facebook and Insta and Blue Sky under my name. And you can also find me on a couple different places. You can find me on Louder Than More Radio out of the United Kingdom on Mondays from 6 to 8 Greenwich Mean Time or 12 to 2 Central, 1 to 3 Eastern. Also, you can listen to me on the Face Radio in Brooklyn, also on Mondays from 5 to 7 Central or 6 to 8 Eastern Time. And then on Saturdays, twice on Saturdays, in fact, with Eardrum Buzz Radio and my show, The Comforts of Madness. It's on in the morning from 9 to 11 Central Time, but then also 8 to 10 Central Time as well, or 9 to 11 Eastern as well. And that show, there's 2 new shows a month because each show repeats twice because I'm too busy to do 3 shows every week. That's where you can find me.
Okay.
Where can we find you, Alan?
Well, I'm just going to give you one place.
Okay.
It's cosmiccreative.com, KOZMICcreative.com. You'll find everything there. Go look it up. All right, we'll be back in 2 weeks. What's our show going to be? We don't know. Rob will be leading. We don't have a topic yet, but we're going to have one. And if you want to suggest one, just let us know. Drop us an email at modernmusicology1@gmail.com, or just find us on our socials and let us know what you thought of the Billy Joel documentary. So everybody join us again in 2 weeks. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.